People lose their income, and everybody faces mortality. Now that's a short list of losses, all of which have to do with our own identities, our personal identities, the way our families form a family identity, and they cause some fragmentation of that cohesive psychological self. Now, this isn't a new idea. Erik Erikson, who some of you may be familiar with, was a very internationally known psychoanalyst back in the 1950s, said that the developmental task in this age population was developing integrity versus lapsing into despair. So this is not a new idea, but just reframed a little bit. So the question is, we're dealing with people who are aging, who have a variety of medical and psychological, psychiatric illnesses and problems. How do we help, just as I tried to help, and winging it for sure with my patient from long ago, how do we help people reconstitute an adaptive, though different, new self? And what are the problems? This is the headline of an article that was in the New York Times a couple weeks ago. I brought the whole thing with me. What this article is about is people in assisted living were having a little revolt, so to speak. Not a real revolt, but they were unhappy because if they weren't in the highest level of care, of independent living in the assisted living place, if they had moved to needing more assistance and more care, they couldn't go into the main dining room and eat. And that's what that headline's all about. So people were being segregated at this particular assisted living place based on their care status, not on their psychological or physical state, really, but if they needed more care and couldn't manage to get in there on their own. So my dad, who, when he got over his broken leg, went back home at age 80, and thank you very much, I don't need any help anymore. He probably wouldn't have been able to go into that dining room because he couldn't get in there by himself. So this is an illustration of a big problem that we've got in our system. Here's another aspect of this issue. This is also from that well-known medical journal, the New York Times. And this is called Bring Healthcare Home. And this is sort of the last topic I want to talk about today, because I think what it illustrates is we need another model change. In modern post-World War II medicine in the US, we expect patients to come to the care. When I was a little kid and I'd go to visit my grandmother in Kansas City, where my mom's from, she had a few health problems. These days we'd say hardly any, but her doctor used to come to see her at her place. Occasionally she'd go to his office, but usually he'd come to her house, not because she was that particularly sick, but I think he'd been taking care of her for about 40 years, and he'd come to her place. Well, as modern medicine got more technological and we had more needs, we now expect the patient to come to us. And this is particularly a problem in the aging population. So I think yet one more change of our frame of reference, change in our model is needed. We need to bring the care to the patient in different ways. Now, we don't have very many models for that. This headline that I just showed you about bringing healthcare home is about a demonstration project from CMS that is a 3-year pilot project, but it's actually only for the segment of the population that has the most severe health problems. So it's not really a change of model comprehensively, it's segregating out the people who are taking the most care, spending the most money for their care, seeing if a home care model would work. But right now, the only models that we really have generally, and there are of course isolated examples, but the VNA has been around for a long time, but that's a pretty scarce resource depending on how broadly we define the need. The Healthcare Reform Act, this Independence at Home demonstration project, is for only a tiny segment of the population and actually the most severely ill part of that population. There are programs in psychiatry called assertive community treatment programs, which go into the community to the patient's home to provide care, but they're exceptionally expensive and therefore not feasible to maintain through an entire system. And again, as I said, they're usually based only on high care utilizers. So again, I think we need to rethink that model. One of the ways to do that, I think, is taking better advantage than we have so far of technology. This is a psychoanalyst sitting in the office, and there's Turtle just barely peeking out of the shell because that turtle's shy and doesn't want to talk too much. And the heading is, would you prefer to send me a text? Now, there's a lot of conversation these days in the social sciences and psychology and psychiatry about what the changes in communications have meant. And I think we've been misinterpreting the younger generation's use of technology and communications. A lot of people say that we're on the road to ruin because kids don't know how to deal with each other anymore. They don't know how to interact. They don't know how to relate. And I must admit that my wife and I finally broke down and got iPhones about 1.5 years ago. And I would say that we, quote, talk to our kids who are in Boston, New Haven, and Seattle, and all just about older than we were when we had kids. No grandchildren, nobody's even married yet, so it's another developmental problem for me, but that's a different lecture. We talk to our kids a heck of a lot more now than we ever did because we can text them and they'll text us back. When my oldest kid went to college, he said, "Dad, I know you used to call your parents every Sunday afternoon when you were at college," because that was the only way of really getting hold of anybody. And I didn't want to sit and write letters. That took way too long. He said, "I just want to let you know I'm not going to do that. But if you send me an email, I'll be glad to answer, and I'll tell you stuff by email too." And I thought, darn, I'm actually going to have to learn how to use this stuff. So again, I think old fogies like me who are in positions to make decisions about healthcare systems have been slow to recognize the opportunities that communications technology give us. That's left us focusing on very expensive systems that rely on physical presence. Patient has to come to see me in my office. So what I think we need to do is shift to find some ways of bringing care to the patient, and that's never going to be cost effective to bring a team of healthcare people around to everybody's house. So it seems to me that one of the things that we ought to give serious thought to is how we can use telecommunications in an effective way in the medical setting. This is barely getting started now, but I think it's going to really take off And I think especially in the elderly population, we have opportunities to do that. So my mom is not forgetful in the slightest. Some days I wish she were a little more forgetful. Now my mom is on about 7 medicines. She's got heart disease and pulmonary disease and renal disease. And that's not actually very many medicines for someone with all those problems in her age group. But my mom being my mom, she doesn't exactly think that the doctors know exactly how to prescribe these medications. So some days when she doesn't want to take them, she just doesn't. So I got a call from her pharmacist. I used to tell stories about my kids more. Now I find I'm telling more stories about my parents. It's a bad sign, probably. Pharmacist said, "Is your mom still taking this medicine?" I said, "Well, yeah, why? It's one of her heart medicines, blood pressure medicine." He said, "Well, I just got, somebody brought in a refill request, and she hadn't had it refilled for 8 months. I'm not exaggerating. And I was glad he called me. He said, "I just didn't know if I should refill it because I didn't know if she was still on it." I said, "She's still on it." So I called my mom. I said, "Mom," we've had this conversation about 300 times. I said, "Mom, you've been taking that medicine." "Well, yeah, why?" I said, "Well, because I just got this call from the pharmacist." She said, "Well, I usually take it." I said, again, we've had this. This is a routine of ours. This is not an unusual guy. I said, "Mom, you do not." She said, "Well, I don't always take it." I said, "Well, you're supposed to take it every day." She said, "Well, some days I just don't feel like it. I take all this medicine and I just don't like taking any medicine. So I don't always take it." I said, "Mom, you need to take it every day." Now, that relies on oldest son being in the same city, being a doctor, understanding what it means to be on this medicine and why that's important for her health, and understanding that the medicine goes away every day if you don't keep taking it. It doesn't stay in your body more than 24 hours in an effective dose. It relies on all of those things being true for me to have that conversation. Well, what if we had the next iteration or two of an iPad at my mom's house, and it was wired in such a way that somebody could beep in the morning with a reminder, "Please be sure to take your meds." Or even better, if the medication box had a little sensor in it and you could tell when the medications weren't in that little compartment anymore. None of this is technologically too hard to do. Or if I have an elderly person who has depression who I know is going to have compliance problems because they may have either greater concentration problems or memory problems just related to the depression itself. If I could check every day to make sure somebody was just taking their medicine, think of how much better care we'd be delivering. There's good data. 50% of prescriptions written in the US, and I don't mean in psychiatry, 50% of all prescriptions are either not filled at all, or if they are filled, as in my mom's example, not taken properly. So we often wonder, why is our patient not getting better when they ought to be? The first biggest problem in all of healthcare is adherence to treatment. So if we just had some communication system, and I'm not a tech guru, as I already admitted to you, I was forced to use email. I think we could do a lot better. So what do? Maybe we need to shift our model a little bit. And if we do, maybe we'll have a few rays of sunlight after the storm. So thank you all.